Good morning everyone. So this is an introductory video through which I will try to give you an introduction to logic, that is an introduction to the discipline that we are going to study in this HS first year. So let us begin by looking at what the word logic actually means. So as you can see, logic has been derived from the Greek word logos, which means thought. So etymologically, logic may be defined as the science of thought as expressed in language. Now you may be wondering, what does the word etymology means? Now when we define something etymologically, it means we are looking at its derivative meaning. That means we are looking at the word from which that particular word is derived and what that word means. So this word logic has been derived from the word logos, and logos means thought. It is a Greek word, it means thought. So by default, logic can be defined as the science of thought as expressed in language. But this word thought is a very big word, and it is a highly ambiguous word. What does ambiguous means? It means that it has many different meanings. There is no one single meaning of the word thought. Thought may mean perception, it may mean memory, it may mean imagination, reasoning, etc. But when we are concerned with logic, we focus mainly on reasoning, not on memory or imagination or perception as such. So, the word reasoning may be substituted for thought in logic for the purpose of clarity. Therefore, logic gets defined as the science of reasoning. You may notice that there are two things here. It is defined as a science and it is defined as the science of reasoning. So it is imperative for us to understand what the word science and reasoning mean respectively. Let us look at the word science. Now, what is a science? A science is a systematic body of knowledge relating to a particular department of nature. For example, physics, botany, psychology, etc. Now, if you notice that science is explained as a systematic body of knowledge. Scientific knowledge is always systematic. There is a system, there is a method, there is an order in the knowledge that is given in a science, and it relates to a particular department of nature. Scientific knowledge is not generic knowledge. Philosophical knowledge is about everything, all the realities that comprise of this entire universe. But when we talk about science, it relates to only particular departments or areas of nature. For example, when you talk about, say, physics, now what does physics deal with? It deals with matter. Botany, it deals with lives. Psychology, it deals with our mental, behavioral setups. So they all relate to a particular departments of nature, not with the whole of nature. So any systematic study that gives you an idea about a particular area of nature is called a science. Now, science is of two kinds. There can be a positive science and there can be normative science. What is a positive science? A positive science is one which deals with things as they actually are. That means it studies the facts as they actually happen to be. Positive sciences are those which deal with facts, things that are there, things that as they happen in nature. That is the area of concern for a positive science. Now, coming to normative science, a normative science is one which deals with things as they should be, not with things as they are. Focus on this area. A normative science deals with things as they should be or as they ought to be, and not with things as they actually are. Let me give you an example that will make things clear. So, physics, as we have seen before, is a positive science. Why? Because it deals with physical phenomena which actually happens in nature. Now, a physicist is not concerned with how the matter is. Suppose you give him a piece of metal, he will simply describe you what the metal is constituted of. What are the components of this metal? What are the properties or features of this metal? He will not delve into the questions of is the metal good or bad, because this is something that a normative science would do. A normative science always sets before itself a norm or an ideal, and then things are judged from the standpoint of that ideal. For example, ethics. Ethics is a normative science because it refers to the ideal of good, and from that standpoint, it judges the rightness or wrongness of human conduct. For example, you do something, and a person who is concerned with ethics will come and judge you whether your action is right or wrong. Suppose you steal something, then the person will tell you that what you have done is wrong, your conduct is wrong, because the ideal here is good. So, this is the difference between a positive science and a normative science. Now, logic, we will see, is a normative science. It is not a positive science. And what is the ideal for logic? The ideal for logic is truth. Logic seeks to know the principles and conditions that our thinking must observe so that the ideal of truth may be attained. Now, let me give you an example. Now, logic gives us these three laws of thought. Okay. These are law of identity, law of non-contradiction, and law of excluded middle. Now, what is law of identity say? That, for example, dog is a dog. Dog is not cat. Now, or say the law of non-contradiction. It says that a shirt cannot be both white and not white. Or excluded middle, where it is said that the shirt is either white or not white. Now, logic deals with this ideal of truth. Whatever we are thinking, it must conform to these laws of thought. These are the ideals or norms which must be followed so that our thinking is correct or incorrect. Logic will tell you whether your thinking is correct or incorrect. And by thinking, I mean reasoning. Whether your reasoning or your thinking is correct or incorrect. So, an ideal of truth is put before us by logic. So, logic is a normative science and it is not a positive science. Logic refers to the ideal of truth and judges the correctness of our thinking with reference to the ideal of truth. And that is why logic is a normative science. Now, coming back to the other part of the definition, we have defined logic as the science of reasoning. We have briefly seen what a science is, and that logic is a normative science. Now, let us come to reasoning. Now, what is reasoning? Reasoning is a mental process of passing from something known to something unknown. So, try to understand this. Reasoning is what? It is, first of all, a mental process. It is something you do it inside your head, in your mind. And what you do in reasoning? You pass from something known to something unknown. Some things are given to you as facts, something known, and then from that you deduce something unknown. And that process, that whole mental process is called reasoning. And when that reasoning is expressed in language, it is called an argument. So, the technical term that is used for reasoning is inference. Inference or reasoning is a mental process in which we pass from one or more given propositions to another which is justified by them. So, in the process of reasoning or inference, there is a mental transition from a set of given propositions to another proposition which is justified by them. The given ones justify the conclusion or the proposition that is drawn. Now, the given propositions are called premise or premises, and the proposition that is reached or drawn is called the conclusion. Let me give you an example to make this point clear. So, suppose you have this piece of argument. It says all smoky objects are fiery. The hill is smoky. And from these two premises, you draw the conclusion that the hill is fiery. Suppose you see that there is a hill in front of you. You know that all smoky objects, the objects from which smoke comes, are fiery. They have fire in them. And in front of you, you see a hill from where smoke is coming. Now, your knowledge of these two known facts get you to this conclusion that the hill must be fiery because it is smoky, and you know that all smoky objects are fiery. Now, this mental process where you have drawn the conclusion that there is fire in this hill because you are seeing smoke in this hill, and you know that smoky objects are fiery, this whole process is called reasoning or inference. Now, inference is of two types. You have deductive inference or deduction, and there is inductive inference or induction. What is deduction? A deductive inference is one in which the conclusion cannot be more general than the premises. The conclusion is contained or implied by the premises, and it is an inference from general to particular. In case of inductive inference, the conclusion is always more general than the premises. The conclusion is established as a general real proposition on the basis of some observed facts. And it is an inference from particular to general. Now, to understand this, let us first see what is a general proposition and what is a particular proposition. Now, a general proposition is a proposition about classes. It does not make an assertion about an individual. For example, all poets are philosophers. Now, this is a general proposition because it talks about two classes. One is the class of poet and the other is the class of philosopher. Now, because you are making an assertion about two classes and not two individuals, it is considered as a general proposition. Now, what is a particular proposition? A particular proposition is one in which the predicate is affirmed or denied of a part of the subject. For example, if I say some men are honest, I am not talking about all men. I am talking about some members of the class of men and some members of the class of honest men. So, that would be a particular proposition, and it may also concern an assertion about an individual person. For example, Rabindranath is a poet. This is a particular proposition. Or Ram is mortal. This is a particular proposition. Now, with these ideas, let us see what a deductive inference is. Here it is said that the conclusion cannot be more general than the premises. So, the two premises or the two propositions from which you draw the conclusion cannot be more general. The conclusion that you draw cannot be more general than the premises. That means the premises will always be general propositions and the conclusion will be a particular proposition. The conclusion is contained or implied by the premises. Now, when you see this example, it will be clear. All poets are philosophers. Rabindranath is a poet. When you consider these two propositions, that all poets are philosophers, that is, whoever is a poet is also a philosopher. Now you are saying that Rabindranath is a poet. So, from these two, the conclusion can be drawn because these two imply the conclusion. If all poets are philosophers and Rabindranath is a poet, therefore Rabindranath must be a philosopher. That is your conclusion. Now, in case of inductive inference, the conclusion is always bigger than the premises. The conclusion is always more general than the premises. So in induction, a general proposition is established on the basis of what? On the basis of some observed fact. It is an inference from particular to general. Consider this example. Say you observe some facts that Ram, a particular man Ram, is mortal. You observe that Sham is mortal, Hari is mortal. Like that, ... you observe 1,000 lakhs or crores of cases where individual persons are seen to be mortal. From this, you draw the general conclusion that all men must be mortal, because these observed individual cases point towards the general proposition that if someone is a man, a human being, then he must be mortal. He will die one day. So, these are the two types of inferences. In the next videos, we will discuss other topics.